Right now, dramatic testimony in the murder trial of Oscar Pistorius, the South African Olympian accused in the shooting death of his girlfriend, model Riva Steenkamp. He claims he thought she was an intruder. Pistorius seen in court today holding his head in his hands as a neighbor described what he encountered at the athlete's home after the fatal shots were fired.
He was crying all the time. He prayed to God to please let her live. She must not die. He said at one stage while he was praying that he will dedicate his life and her life to God if she would just only live and not die that night.
That's the voice of Johann Stipp, a radiologist and a neighbor of Oscar Pistorius. Let's bring in our legal panel, former prosecutor Dan Schorr and criminal defense attorney Ashley Merchant. Ashley, to you first. One of the things that this guy said is that, you know, he gets to the house, he finds Oscar Pistorius cradling his girlfriend's body. Apparently she's already deceased. He's trying to keep her airway open, and he says, "I shot her. I thought she was an intruder." Doesn't that help the defense case and not the prosecution?
It definitely helps the defense. I think this just buttresses Pistorius' story that he said from day one that he was scared, he thought she was a burglar, and that was justifiable. Because what he's saying is that it wasn't self-defense against Steenkamp, but it was actually, he thought he had to act in self-defense because he thought someone was breaking into the house. So this neighbor and their testimony goes right along with Pistorius' story because it shows that he was acting how we would expect someone to act if they'd accidentally shot a loved one. He was distraught. He was upset, he was crying, he was begging for her to live, praying to God. Those are all the things that we think someone would do in that type of situation.
Dan, you're the prosecutor on this panel. This was a prosecution witness, as I understand it. Why would they put on a guy who would tell this story?
Well, I disagree that this helps the defense. This is very powerful testimony because it shows the reality and the enormity of what Oscar Pistorius did. But remember, just because a court is a formal place with lawyers and a judge, it doesn't mean that you leave your everyday common sense at home. And common sense tells you there's no reason at all to shoot into a closed bathroom door 4 times when you know your girlfriend's staying over and you think she's in bed. You're going to find out who's in there. You're going to make sure she's in bed or not in bed. It just defies all common sense. So just because he had a cover story within minutes after he shot her, that doesn't really help him, I think.
Well, and our correspondent, Paul Tilsley, who's there in the courtroom covering this thing, Ashley, says that the doctor testified that he heard the gunshots, and even though they were neighbors, he had to get in his car, drive through some kind of a security gate, and then once he was cleared in through the gate, he arrived at Pistorius' house. That suggests a fair amount of time passed before Oscar Pistorius, before he finds Pistorius there with Riva Steenkamp on the ground. And apparently Pistorius had not yet called an ambulance.
Right, and I think that is damaging testimony if he had not actually called an ambulance. I believe he called some of his security guards. So it can be reasonable for him to get up there and testify now, well, I thought my security was going to call an ambulance. What I was trying to do was save her, because he was trying to save her. He apparently was trying to press on the wound and actually had his fingers in her mouth trying to open her airway. So he was trying to save her. So that does actually help his argument that this was self-defense and that he did not intend to kill her. The issue here, the tricky thing for Pistorius, is going to be whether or not he's found guilty of the lesser crime of culpable homicide, where the judge would then determine that he was maybe negligent, perhaps. It wasn't premeditated murder. He didn't actually intend to kill her, but he was negligent in firing. And I think that's a much stronger case for them than what they're reaching for, which is overreaching, in my opinion, of premeditated murder.
Also some new developments in another case we're following, and let's turn to that now. A one-time Colorado socialite accused of plotting the murder of her ex-husband for the insurance money. You see Pamela Phillips in court there. Dan, one of the aspects of this case that was testified to yesterday is that prosecutors found $400,000 in payments that had been sent from Pamela Phillips to Robert Young, her ex-boyfriend, who, although this jury hasn't heard it, was convicted of setting the car bomb that killed this man. Who sends $400,000 to an ex-boyfriend?
There's really no logical explanation for that, and I think that's one reason you'll never see her take the stand, because then she'll have to actually give some kind of answer to that. There's a clear motive in this case. She got a $2 million insurance policy after her ex-husband was killed. Her ex-boyfriend has been convicted in the killing, as you said, and it looks like she paid him $400,000. She also, according to other testimony, made a statement to a friend before the killing saying that maybe she should hire a hitman to kill her husband. So there's a lot of evidence here, and the prosecution's trying to tie it together.
Ashley, how does the defense try to counteract that?
Well, like Dan said, she's probably not going to be able to take the stand, because how is she going to possibly explain this payment? She may say that she was trying to pay him back or something, but what the state's going to need to do is they're going to need to actually bring this gentleman, Mr. Young, into court so he could explain that. And I'm betting he's not going to come to court very willingly, since he is now serving a life sentence for his own murder conviction.
Yeah, it is a fascinating case. We'll continue to watch it. Dan Schorr and Ashley Merchant. I tried to give you the name of the defendant there. Sorry, Ashley.
No, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.